of young people may never be able to own their own homes because of a grave housing crisis. Here's why.
House prices have come down a little bit, but they went up by a lot in the previous couple of years, so perhaps we're not better off.
The British property market has just been hit with the biggest shock in decades. And no, it's not interest rates or a price crash. What happened 3 days ago is far more dangerous, far more calculated, and far more hidden. Buried deep inside over 200 pages of new government documentation, the Labour government quietly revealed their master plan. And when I dug through every page, cross-checked the authors, and traced their connections, the truth I uncovered was shocking. This isn't simply rental reform. This is the beginning of a systematic dismantling of private property ownership in Britain. Everything you've been told is a lie. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why nearly 1 in 4 landlords is preparing to sell before these laws even take effect, and why what's coming will change the entire future of property in the UK. Here's what mainstream media will never tell you. The real winners of these reforms aren't tenants. They're not landlords either. The real winners are entities hiding in plain sight. The same investment giants who have spent years quietly shaping the British housing market. For 5 years, I've investigated the hidden forces manipulating UK property. But nothing compares to what I discovered this week. Because the rental reform announcement wasn't just a policy change. It was a declaration of war on private ownership. And here's the part nobody noticed. The 200-page government document outlining these changes wasn't written by politicians. It was written by consulting firms who advise BlackRock, Vanguard, and trillion-dollar investment funds. I tracked the authors, mapped their connections, and uncovered a network that links Downing Street to Wall Street, all coordinating a single objective. Everyone is talking about the end of no-fault evictions. The media calls it a victory for tenants. Housing charities celebrate it. Even some landlords shrug and say it's not that bad. They're all missing the point completely. The end of Section 21 isn't about tenant protection. It's about data. It forces every rental transaction through government-controlled systems. Hidden in Section 47 of the bill is the creation of a national property registration database. Every landlord, every tenant, every agreement must be logged before a tenancy can begin. But the truth is buried deeper. Technical documentation, which I obtained through a Freedom of Information request, shows that the database isn't limited to rentals. It integrates with mortgages, planning applications, council tax, sales records, even inheritance data. For the first time in UK history, the government will have real-time access to the complete financial footprint of every property owner. Think about that for a second. Why would a government, supposedly focused on helping tenants, need access to mortgage data? Why track property inheritance in a rental reform bill? The answer is clear. This isn't about tenants. This is about wealth mapping, identifying exactly who owns what and where, so it can be targeted. And it gets worse. The consulting firms behind these reforms, McKinsey Property Solutions and PwC Real Estate Advisory, have worked on rental legislation in over 30 countries. In every case, small landlords were forced to sell, rental supply dropped, and institutional investors moved in. Germany is the blueprint. After similar reforms in 2015, corporate giants bought hundreds of thousands of properties from small landlords. Rents soared 67% in Berlin, 53% in Munich, 49% in Frankfurt. Complex regulations destroyed competition, and now the same strategy is coming to Britain. It doesn't stop there. Those same institutional investors fund tenant rights organizations across Europe. They sponsor research, conferences, and even write policy recommendations, all while quietly buying up rental properties. In the UK, 37% of funding for Generation Rent comes from corporate property firms, Shelter, Britain's largest housing charity, has received over £2 million from large-scale rental investors in the past 5 years. These groups claim to fight for tenants, but in reality, they're clearing the path for corporate landlords. Meanwhile, landlords are being set up to fail. Small investors can't absorb months of void periods, legal fees, or compliance costs. The result? Forced sales at 18% below market value. Wealth transferred from individuals to corporate giants under the guise of protecting tenants. The government says these reforms will roll out gradually, Section 21 abolition first, then the rest over 18 months. Sounds reasonable? Wrong. The sequencing is designed to maximize disruption. No-fault evictions end in summer 2025, but the landlord database isn't mandatory until spring 2026. Rent dispute tribunals won't be fully operational until autumn 2026, meaning for over a year, landlords lose their main legal tools without any replacement. This legal limbo benefits only corporate landlords, who can afford lawyers, compliance teams, and technology. Small landlords are forced to sell. Internal government documents obtained by my sources show this is deliberate. The timeline is engineered to consolidate market power in the hands of institutional investors, while keeping public outrage minimal. But here's where it gets truly shocking. The rental reform bill isn't standalone. It's part of a bigger global plan. Multiple UK government departments are coordinating with international organizations most people have never heard of: the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, the International Property Investment Alliance, and the World Economic Forum's Future of Real Estate Initiative. For over a decade, these groups have worked to reshape property ownership models across developed nations. Their goal? To move from inefficient individual ownership to centralized institutional management of residential property. In plain terms, they want to eliminate small landlords and concentrate ownership in the hands of corporate giants. The UK reforms are just one piece of a worldwide program being rolled out simultaneously across Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. I've seen the coordination documents myself. Quarterly reports between these organizations track ownership optimization progress in different countries. Shockingly, the UK is behind schedule. We were supposed to implement these changes in early 2024. The delay until summer 2025 has frustrated international coordinators. These aren't theoretical plans. They are carefully monitored global strategies. And if you think this only affects landlords, think again. Tenants will feel the impact too. Rents will skyrocket as small landlords are forced to sell. The same pattern has repeated everywhere. Institutional investors buy properties cheaply, then gradually increase rents, while funding tenant advocacy groups to legitimize the reforms. Britain is now following the same playbook, and most people don't even know it's happening. Let's get into the numbers, because this is where the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. Treasury economists predict that 20% to 30% of current landlords will exit the market within 2 years of implementation. That's roughly 450,000 rental properties either sold or repurposed. With supply dropping while demand remains constant, rents will soar. Based on historical data, a 20% drop in rental supply leads to rent increases of 35 to 47%. A 30% drop? Expect 55 to 70%. Already, pilot programs in Birmingham, Manchester, and London show the trend. Rents are up 28% in Birmingham, 31% in Manchester, and 37% in London's trial areas. The increases aren't random. They favor large corporate landlords who can absorb compliance costs and navigate bureaucracy. Small landlords are forced out, creating massive wealth transfer from individuals to institutions. The implementation timeline has been carefully designed to maximize market disruption. No-fault evictions end first in summer 2025, But the Landlord database won't be mandatory until spring 2026. The tribunal system for rent disputes won't be fully operational until autumn 2026. For over a year, landlords lose their main eviction tool without gaining access to replacement systems. They'll operate in a legal limbo where problem tenants can't be removed and compliant tenants can't be fully protected. The only ones who can navigate this period? Corporate landlords with expensive legal teams and compliance specialists. This isn't incompetence, it's strategy. Reports from McKinsey and PwC confirm this. Their private recommendations explicitly advocate a managed transition to facilitate market consolidation. Gradual implementation creates optimal conditions for institutional entry while keeping rental supply stable enough to avoid political backlash. Translation: big players buy up the market while small landlords struggle. But there's more. The Rental Reform Bill is part of a broader global program coordinated with the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, the International Property Investment Alliance, and the World Economic Forum's Future of Real Estate initiative. These organizations have spent over a decade reshaping property ownership in developed nations, aiming to move from individual ownership to centralized institutional management. The UK reforms are just one piece of an international strategy. Similar laws are rolling out in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and several European countries within an 18-month window. The UK is actually behind schedule. The original implementation target was early 2024. The delay until summer 2025 has frustrated international coordinators, but it doesn't change the trajectory. This is Phase 1. Phase 2 involves beneficial ownership optimization, restricting who can own property and how many properties. Phase 3 is market efficiency enhancement, automated allocation systems, AI-driven rent setting, and centralized rental management. Tenants will apply through government portals, rents will be algorithmically set, and property allocation may depend on social scores and financial profiles. Parts of China already use this system. The same consulting firms involved in China's programs are now working on UK reforms. The Landlord database isn't just registration. Technical specs reveal predictive analytics modules flagging properties and landlords as high risk based on ownership patterns, management style, and property count, not actual violations. Individual landlords with just one or two properties are flagged as high risk. Those who manage their properties personally rather than using corporate services are at a disadvantage. Even tenants will be profiled. Credit history, employment, social media activity, and associations with other tenants flagged as problematic. Preferred tenant pools will require algorithmic approval. The government claims this is about fairness, but it's social control through housing. And the tech providers? Palantir Technologies, Cambridge Analytica successors, Huawei subsidiaries. Behavioral pattern analysis, tenant risk scoring, property monitoring. The contracts are publicly available. Enforcement will be managed by a new housing standards and compliance agency with unprecedented powers. Enter properties without warrants. Freeze rental income. Impose financial penalties exceeding annual rental yields, and even force property sales. The kicker? Staffed by employees from the same consulting firms and corporations that helped design the system. McKinsey employees will assess compliance. PwC staff will enforce property standards, and corporate employees will determine penalties. Conflicts of interest are built in. Appeals are nearly impossible, requiring expensive judicial review, and standards are based on flexible, sustainable housing principles, not traditional law. Pilot cases already show the system in action. In Manchester, a landlord was fined £12,000 because his EPC rating, though legal, failed sustainability standards. In Birmingham, a landlord was forced to sell because tribunal deemed her 7% rental yield exploitative. In London, a landlord's income was frozen for 6 months because tenant screening showed alleged bias. And if landlords try to sell en masse, government can invoke property market stability measures, restrict sales, impose cooling-off periods, force landlords to rent to approved buyers first. Small landlords are trapped, forced to comply, but unable to exit easily. Tenants are also at risk. Once institutional investors dominate, protections become meaningless. Large corporations have armies of lawyers, lobbying power, and resources to outlast any tenant dispute. When a few firms control most properties, tenants have no alternatives. In U.S. cities with high corporate ownership, tenants are subjected to fees for inspections, maintenance, and even rent processing. Algorithmic rent increases can happen multiple times per year. Corporate landlords cross-subsidize losses, pursue minor claims aggressively, and enforce policies that would be impossible for individual landlords. Protections won't stop them. The rental database isn't just about registration. It's a surveillance system integrated with other government databases. Movement patterns, financial transactions, social associations, and behavioral changes will be tracked for every property owner and tenant. Lifestyle analysis can flag unusual spending, irregular movement, or signs of job loss, relationship issues, or mental health struggles. Algorithmic intervention could trigger social services visits, credit restrictions, housing penalties, or forced relocation. The system is framed as supporting vulnerable tenants, but it's a tool to control where people live, how much they pay, and what they're allowed to do in their homes. Behavioral modification protocols will restrict property access based on social scoring. Tenants flagged for antisocial behavior may be confined to designated areas. Property owners who fail community compliance standards might be barred from owning in certain neighborhoods. This is a system of housing as social control. And it's not implemented by dictators. It's democratically elected politicians who believe they're improving society. They see individual property ownership as inefficient, free markets as unequal, and algorithmic decisions as fair. They genuinely think this is optimizing social outcomes, which makes it even more dangerous. So what can we do? We must fight a system spanning government departments, international organizations, and corporations. Legal challenges are essential but not enough. Property rights groups and privacy advocates are preparing cases against surveillance, exit restrictions, and data collection. Public pressure is crucial. Awareness can change political calculations. Economic resistance is powerful. Coordinated non-compliance, rent strikes, and alternative rental markets could disrupt implementation. The most important strategy is information warfare, educating landlords, tenants, and citizens. Time is critical. Once operational, surveillance, legal, and economic controls will make resistance almost impossible.